Welcome to Security and GRC Decoded, the podcast where security, governance, risk, and compliance professionals, CISOs, executive leaders, and practitioners can stay ahead of industry trends and challenges. I'm your host, Raj Krishnamurthy, founder of Compliance Club. Join us twice a month to bring you expert insights, actionable strategies, and real-world stories to elevate your security, governance, risk, and compliance programs. Each week, we decode the complexities of GRC to help you make smarter decisions and drive innovation in your organization. Let's dive into today's conversation. Welcome.
Hey. Welcome to another episode of Security and GRC Decoded. I'm your favorite host, Raj Krishnamurthy. Today, I have the pleasure of having Rajiv Dattani and David Meyer from AIUC, Artificial Intelligence Underwriting Company. Did I say that right, Rajiv?
You did.
Okay. Rajiv is the co-founder of AIUC, and AIUC is in the business of certifying and insuring AI agents. And David works with Rajiv in the certification program at AIUC. Welcome to the show, guys.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Rajiv, let me go straight to you. What prompted you to start AIUC? Why?
We spent a lot of time exploring the gap that's emerging between the frontier of AI capability and risk and where the rest of the world is on assessing that risk. So my professional background is I spent a decade at McKinsey. I helped a lot of large enterprises on how do you get comfortable with the risk with cloud and new technologies that come out. And we've seen with cloud, for example, this process takes decades for some companies to get comfortable with. On the other hand, since I left McKinsey, I was at Meter, the AI risk evaluator. And whilst there, I led the partnerships with the labs and the governments. And saw just how sophisticated some of the techniques are and how advanced some of the research now is around assessing these capabilities. And really just felt this enormous gap. And there's a trust and a confidence gap between the frontier and the rest of the world. And so we built AIUC to really bridge that gap. We think of ourselves as building the confidence infrastructure that allows a CISO, a security leader, a risk leader to definitively answer, can I trust this AI agent?
Okay. And when you say trust this AI agent, is this about AI agents being used inside the company? Is it about AI agents being embedded as products, which or both? What is it?
It's AI agents that are, it's both. And it's AI agents that are speaking to customers, handling sensitive data, exposed to have access to systems that are high risk and contain sensitive information. And really, this is now everywhere, right? Even your traditional SaaS vendors are embedding AI. And the question we spend a lot of time with CISOs on is how are you assessing that risk, and what are the risks out there that your data is being exposed to, and how's it being used, and how do we help you get a grip of that?
Got it. One question I had, I was trying to look this up, and one of my friends, Mosi Platt, pointed me to this, and this was completely unrelated, right? And he pointed to me at an article that basically was written on somewhere mid-April that says insurance carriers quietly back away from covering AI outputs. And this was an article written by Grant Ross. And what they're basically saying is that the insurance companies don't want to underwrite any policies for claims related to AI-generated outputs for cybersecurity errors and omissions. I guess your entire purpose is to go solve that problem, right? Is it that these guys do not know about you? How should I process this?
Yeah, and there's the article you mentioned. The FT have also done a couple of, the Financial Times have done a couple of deep dives on this in the last few months as well. Most of the major carriers have now filed for what's known in insurance language as exclusions for AI risks. The reason for that is usually insurers wait to let data emerge. They'll wait on the sidelines for a couple of years of a new technology. We saw this with cyber 25 years ago. And they want to see in the real world, how is the system or the risk emerging? What's it going to cost? How frequently is it going to occur? And with AI, clearly we're too early for that. Now, our thesis is actually the insurance model needs to be disrupted by this. And the reason is, even if you had 3 years of lost data on AI, it wouldn't help you today. If you had lost data on how ChatGPT creates issues, is that going to help you insure an OpenClaw instance or a Claude Code instance? Absolutely not. And the way we solve that is through our AIUC 1 certification, we have three kind of layers of this. One is we check for the policies, much like other standards do. The second is we check the code base. How are the safeguards configured? And what's the input filtering? What's the output filtering? And then the third layer is, and this is what's new to AI, is we run thousands of simulations. You can think of it a bit like a cyber pen test. And the reason this matters is AI systems are valuable, but also risky because they're stochastic in nature. They're not deterministic. So, but by running the same tests and advanced tests thousands and thousands of times, you can simulate what the loss distribution will be for an insurer. And so we partner with some of the world's oldest cyber insurers at Lloyd's of London.
Yep.
And they have built with us a dedicated AI E&O policy that is designed to cover these risks for companies that are AIUC 1 certified.
Got it. No, I think that's fantastic. I want to talk about the certification process. I definitely, I'm sure our listeners will want to understand. But before I do that, Rajiv and David, I want to talk about your business model. Right, looks like a very interesting proposition because we in the cybersecurity world are typically used to seeing standards that is different from advisors and implementers and auditors and certifiers. You seem to be all rolled up into one. Is that correct? Can you talk about the business model? What is the business model for you?
Absolutely. We were all of these when we launched initially. And the reason we were all of these is we think especially early on, the feedback loop between building the standard and applying it in practice, helping companies get ready, and then certifying against it shows, and we learned a lot through this process, where are all the gaps? What are the things in the standards that aren't clear? What are the risks that are still being left unaddressed by the standard? Now that we've done that and we've run a number of these, we're now opening up the ecosystem. So Shellman were our first accredited auditor. Coalfire have now been provisionally accredited. There's many more auditors coming in the accreditation pipeline. We work with them to train them. We will do the quality assurance on their work to make sure they've interpreted the standard correctly, consistently. They're holding a high bar. We must avoid another SOC 2 where the standard just gets hollowed out over time and is applied inconsistently. We're also at the start of the journey of opening up the technical testing. Today, we run the technical testing in-house. And the reason for that is very hard to know if somebody's run the technical tests accurately, if it's been run rigorously. But we're working through that problem at the moment, and we'll have more on that this year, certainly. And then we're also now working with MSPs who can go and do the readiness. So we're slowly opening all of these out. We will continue to do some of these ourselves, right? So to your question on the business model, we will continue to be the certification body. We'll charge a fee for that. And we will do some of these services ourselves also because that keeps us close to it. And then we will also make revenue on the insurance product where if a company is being certified, wants to then be insured, the insurers pay us a fee for that data that they're using, the AIUC 1 data. And we think that matters because that also aligns our interest with our customers' end users' interest. Because if ultimately our revenue is linked to how well we price the policy, then actually we have every incentive in the world to hold the bar high rather than hollow it out.
Got it.
One thing I would add as well to what Rajiv is saying is the way we develop the standard and the way we update the standard every quarter is also a process which is very collaborative, and we have a consortium of maybe Fortune 500 security leaders we meet with every month who really are there to tell us what's happening on the ground, what risks they're seeing, and we incorporate this feedback in every quarterly release of the standard. So even the definition of the requirements is also something that is pretty open and collaborative process on top of the verification itself.
Okay, got it. And how do you see yourself coexisting with a whole bunch of other requirements, if I will, right? I mean, there is the OWASP top 10 from an LLM perspective. There is MITRE Atlas. There are a whole bunch of these frameworks, right? ENISA has an AI, Databricks, for example, has an AI governance and AI security framework. How do they all correlate with what you're doing at AIUC-1?
Yeah, we partner with all of them. So all the ones you mentioned, we've partnered closely with. We have crosswalks on the website that show just how these frameworks relate to each other. So that's with OWASP, with Databricks, with MITRE Atlas, with a lot of the Cloud Security Alliance work as well, which is excellent in this space. The way we think about it is a lot of these other frameworks are either specific on a subset of risks. So OWASP top 10, I would put in this category. It covers a specific set of technical risks. It doesn't go broader into the accountability and the policies. Or they're operating at one level higher of abstraction than where we are. So the way we think about it is something like NIST, say IRMF is kind of the overall principles at the highest possible level. Then one level lower than that is something like the CSA's AICM, which takes it and makes it much more practical. But still, neither of these frameworks define the specific evidence and the control activities that would definitively tell you, yes, I've met the standard or not met it. We take all of that into the operational level. And we think that that's the role of the market. The nonprofits and the industry bodies are fantastic at setting the principles, but actually the market on the front line is by working with the vendors and with the companies that we can iterate very quickly on what exactly does good assurance look like, what does good security look like, and then incorporate that into the standard. We have a quarterly refresh cycle that you might be familiar with, Raj, where we, together with the AIUC One Consortium, will always review what are the requirements that didn't make sense, where is the technology and the frontier advancing on both safeguards and on capabilities, and how do we incorporate that into the standard operationally within those principles that the other frameworks have set out.
Got it. No, I think that's pretty cool. Maybe we can, what does the certification process look like? How long does it take? Can you describe that a little bit, please?
Yeah, happy to go into that. So typically, the certification process applies at the level of the agentic product. So the first thing we need to do is understand what the customer wants to certify as a product. Once we've understood this, we kick off like an 8 weeks process. The first half of those 8 weeks is focused on running those technical evaluations that Rajiv mentioned before. So we'll understand the context of the agent, the risk it's exposed to, its capabilities, design a suite of evaluations that represent the risks the agent is exposed to in a normal production context, run them, grade them, and then at the end of those 4 weeks, first 4 weeks, that's when the auditors come in to verify the policies and verify the artifacts in the code that help govern the agent and ensure it's configured properly. So typically 8 weeks from kickoff to certificate issued and audit report delivered. Obviously, this can change a little bit based on the capabilities of the agent itself, but that's what customers should budget for.
And just to clarify there, Raj, that is from when the company is ready, meaning they have all the policies in place. So often it's a 6-month process to get ready for the AIUC One audit, and then the final step is the 8 weeks David described.
Got it. Beautiful. And how should when let's fast forward this. For example, UiPath went through this, and we recently met with Sharon as well as in the podcast. So when, let's say, the leadership, the security office, right, sees this, or even the management leadership sees this, sees AIS, what do you want them to take away? Saying that we are AIUC-1 certified. What do you think it means for A, the CISO, B, let's say, the CEO?
Yeah, I'll maybe say the highest level thing, and then David, you can add about the departments we spend time with. I think the highest level is, and this was true at UiPath, these are the companies today getting certified who are not only, these are the companies who are not only being certified and having good security, but they are leading the way on setting the standard. This space is so new that if you want to be known as not only an AI capability leader, but also an AI security leader, that's where partnering with AIUC One makes sense. And for lots of companies, that doesn't make sense. They would say, we want this to be more established in the market and that to come later. That's completely fine. But the companies we're working with, we really see as being on the frontier of AI security. David, you can talk more about what that means in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. In practice, it means companies who have typically invested a lot in their AI security posture already and are looking for a third-party validation of this investment and kind of ensure certification that it's on the standard and it's compliant with the best practices defined by really the people buying AI who are represented on our consortium. Typically, the agents that we recommend for certification are in production, obviously, are close to production, commercially facing, and sold to enterprises. And those three kind of criteria really determine where the companies will get the biggest return on their investment in time for the certification that we offer.
Okay. And I think you guys have done a phenomenally great job of laying out some of the pillars on AIUC-1 data. Some of these are sort of very understandable, data and privacy, security, but then you also have reliability, which is very interesting, right? And safety, accountability, and society. Maybe it'll be helpful if you can maybe go down how you see these pillars. What do you want to? What should I take away from these pillars? And how do you actually go test for them? You talked about Rajiv being a sort of AI pen testing. Maybe explain to us a little bit, how do you go about each of these pillars and what is the intent of each of these pillars?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with the intent, and then David can talk more about how we test each of them. Maybe the highest level intent is we want to cover all the risks that matter in one place. We don't want to be another framework where you need this and something else and something else. And so the way this came together is through, we've spoken to thousands now of security and risk leaders on really trying to understand all of the risks that matter to them and make sure that AIUC 1 can address them. Some of the requirements are optional, so not everyone has to be tested for everything. But if your system, for example, society that you mentioned is in there, if your system is capable of generating deepfakes, actually that is a societal level risk that matters to all of us. And we think it's important that that is covered alongside the specific data leak risk. We're seeing, obviously, with Mythos, the ability of models to conduct cyber attacks. And we think it's a matter of time before what's known as CBRN risks are also here. So this is things like
CBRN.
Yeah, so this is things like bioweapons. And can AI systems help with that? Is probably the next risk that will happen. Chemical is the C, radioactive,
I
nuclear.
see.
These models are dual purpose, and so they can always help with the attack as well as helping with the defense. And cyber is the first domain we've seen this with Mythos, but there's going to be a lot more of these risks coming down the line, and we want to be clear that AIUC 1 is designed to cover that as those risks happen. And then maybe just to touch on the others you mentioned, accountability. Clearly, there is a lot here in how do humans relate to the systems, and this is going to become more important in the agentic era. And the EU AI Act has a lot of requirements on this, so we want to make sure also that these are in harmony. And reliability, we think, matters because things like hallucinations and tool call failures actually can have quite catastrophic effects. And this is going to get dialed up when we have multi-agent pipelines. So today we're mostly still in the era of single agents. It's kind of human to a single agent. But as soon as we have agent-to-agent interactions and multi-agent orchestration, the way those systems interact and the potential risk for cascading failures if that interaction is happening either insecurely or is failing in some way, we think is significant. And so that's why those risks are covered in there. David, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the way we test for some of these.
Yeah, I'll give you an example, Raj. So for instance, if you look at our safety pillar, typically we'll look at the likelihood of an agent engaging in offensive speech, right, when it's being elicited by a user. And our testing methodology here is to approach this by two angles. We have what we call kind of a black box testing. So that's where our evaluations will come in. So we don't care about what's in the agents. We'll submit a prompt trying to elicit the agent to engage in this kind of speech. And then we'll take the answer, grade it, and see how likely it is to do it. And we'll couple that with a white box testing approach where we'll actually open the lid, look at what guardrails have been implemented, what mechanisms are there and configured in the code to prevent this type of behavior from the agent. And combining both of those approaches is what kind of gives us the certainty that, one, the company has taken steps to secure their agents, and two, that those steps are actually efficient in preventing the type of behavior that they want to avoid. So it's really how to think about testing.
Love it. No, I think I love it. I think you said it. Black box testing has to be coupled with some deeper insights into sort of how the companies architect and build and deploy these systems. What I want to ask you is on. I think you touched on Mythos and Project Glasswing, right? I think that has, to some extent, sent shivers across, right? Especially with 0-day vulnerabilities, very latent 27-year-old vulnerabilities being uncovered right now. How do you see that intersection? What does that mean for AIUC-1? Because how are you going to address, or is there a way you're addressing or not addressing those questions?
Yeah, we address the risks that come from AI systems specifically. So to the extent that Mythos is kind of exposing existing cyber risks, that is something that is largely out of scope still. And the reason for that is there's clearly an entire cyber industry that's been built over decades that's working on that. We don't want to create overlap and confusion with that. The place we think this gets interesting is if you are building AI agents, you should know that they are now capable of conducting some of these attacks if they don't have the right guardrails. So that's one area we help. I think a second area we can help is the response to Mythos, and we've just published a white paper on this with 100 or so of our consortium members. The response to Mythos needs to include automated SOC and vuln detection, and how do you as a security leader use AI internally inside your security org to keep up. And then I think some of the same questions that we're addressing in AIUC 1 suddenly come up again of, well, how do you know it's reliable? How do you know that it's secure, actually? Because if it finds a vulnerability and then that agent gets hacked, that's a huge issue for you and your security team. And so that's where we see AIUC 1 playing a role, is in helping the CISOs who are using agents to respond to Mythos and Mythos-like capabilities to make sure those agents are reliable, safe, and secure.
I see. Got it. I think one thing as an engineer that I've always found it very difficult to sort of comprehend, right, is that, a few years ago when we build models, and there is a way to explain these models because there are a few hundred, few thousand, few tenths of thousands of parameters. That explainability is practically impossible in the world of large language models, where you're talking about sort of parameters going billions and trillions of tokens being processed, so on and so forth, right? So my question to you is, a lot of this seems to be prompt and prompt outcome based, which means that it is inherently probabilistic as well. So how do you try to create explainability based on prompts and getting the outputs from those prompts?
We do this by achieving statistical significance in the number of prompts that we run against the system. So the way this would work is, once we understand an agent, what it does, what data it has access to, we'll define a number of scenarios that are addressable scenarios that this agent might be exposed to in production. And then for each of the scenarios, and the scenarios are characterized by a risk and a type of attack. So a risk could be leaking data. A type of attack would be an encoding, a specific encoding of the prompt on the agent itself. Once we have the list of those risks, we'll define a distribution, which we think is representative of what the agent is exposed to in production. And then we'll run and the total number of prompts and the type of prompt that needs to be run to achieve this kind of statistical significance. So the idea is really to try and describe the entire landscape of risk and threat that the agent is exposed to and have enough evaluations to understand how likely the agent to engage in a type of behavior, and how to understand, quantify this risk at the end of the day.
Can you describe more about the community? Talk to us about sort of I see you guys are doing a phenomenally great job. I think I see some fantastic people joining the community, and that's a great thing. But how are you thinking about this community? How are you going about building this community? And what do you see is the role of the community in what you're doing?
Yeah, it's a privilege to have the community we have, Raj, and I saw lots of them have been guests on your podcast as well. So there's a nice overlap there. The question of how do we make sure security keeps up with AI, we think is just such an important question and such a hard question. It's just so hard for any one group to solve this alone. And we wanted to make sure that as we set about this mission, we bring in all of the wisdom that is out there in the community from across industries, from across geographies, from across domains. And so what that looks like in practice is, clearly it's kind of CISO and security leader heavy from across these industries, but also we have AI researchers there. We have the professor who leads Stanford University's Trustworthy AI Research Lab. We have a professor at MIT and others there who are kind of helping us with what's happening on the frontier of AI research, because often research, especially in this domain, is a front runner to what's going to happen in industry and in deployment in the months that follow. We have policy experts, so some of them are academics. We have Dean Ball, who wrote President Trump's AI action plan and worked in the White House until recently, advising on how does this all fit together with regulations and other frameworks, and how should we think about this? We have legal scholars, because clearly these interactions are going to be questions that the courts are going to answer as well. Who's liable when an AI agent fails? If you're a CISO and you have bought an AI agent from a vendor, and that agent fails in a way the vendor knew it could fail, are you now liable because it's deployed on your systems and it's your customers, or is the vendor liable? And how should AIUC one handle questions like that? And so that's really the intent of bringing it together. We meet across topics. We often just have closed door sessions on the Chatham House rule on what are you seeing, compare learnings, and a space for these industry leaders to really ask their questions and share their learnings, all the way through to at least once a quarter when we update the standard. We'll do a formal process to gather their input. They peer review all the changes in the standard, and they also can help hold us to account as the company to make sure that we're acting in the best interest of the community.
Got it. And how big can you describe, is there any way to describe how big is the community? How big, I mean, how much growth are you seeing? And more importantly, somebody who's watching this podcast wants to be part of the community, what should they do?
Yeah, the short answer is contact me. We'd love to have you.
Okay.
Rajiv at AIUC.com is my email, or you can find me on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. The community has grown extremely fast. So we only launched it 6 months ago. At the time we launched it, we had about 50 names in there, and I think we had 35 people or something on our first kickoff meeting. We're now at 250 people.
Okay.
And so also I'll share, Raj, that we're exploring a little bit of what should the next evolution of the community be, right? Clearly, we've now exceeded a scale where everyone can be part of one community, and we're starting to think about how do we get working groups going, and how do we start to specialize the knowledge and the expertise we have in that community. So more to come on this. We haven't got all the answers figured out, but that's it's certainly our hope to build a community of experts who are excited to contribute to building AIUC One and share their learnings.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay. I want to go back to the other question, which is, once I get certified, then what? I mean, is there a continuous certification process? How should customers think about this?
Yeah, so first, when you get certified, you get a 100-page audit report that describes everything that you're doing to make your AI agent secure. That includes the result of the test that we've been running on the agent. And this report is something that is typically kind of produced downstream to customers, stakeholders, as kind of a way to signal trust and explain what you're doing. We then rerun our technical test every quarter to make sure to catch any evolution in the product or in the underlying foundation models. And we'll just append the kind of most recent results to the certification report that you have. And every year you need to renew this certification. So we have this kind of yearly cycle with quarterly retesting that runs in parallel to the update of our standard, which is something we run with the community you just mentioned, where every quarter we'll issue new requirements, or we'll evolve and precise the requirements that we have to keep up with AI. And so we'll try to run those two timelines in parallel, making sure that the AIUC One certificate basically is up to date and attached to the reality of the kind of latest threats, capabilities, risks that AI agents are exposed to.
Okay, got it. And is there do you eventually expect, as you're sort of disintermediating this, right, where you're becoming the standards body and you're going to have other participate in this? I don't know if you've heard of the STAR program in CSA, where you can go report these signals. Do you have the infrastructure today where you can allow others to report their signals to you, or are you building one? Can you describe a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're certainly moving in that direction. The challenge, and I alluded to this earlier, is it's very hard to know if somebody else has done the technical testing well. The tests, firstly, there's thousands of them, and often each test is hundreds, some of them are thousands of lines of code, or text in foreign languages, or voice conversations, depending on the modality. And so if we or anyone just received all of this evidence, we think it'd be very hard to pass and know, did you run the kind of right rigor of tests? Have you graded them accurately? Have you covered all the risks? Would be a challenge. There are solutions to these problems. In particular, we think standards like PCI did a very good job early days of thinking through how do you equip others to run the tests themselves and submit evidence and still hold that bar. So we're working actively on it, but we don't have a solution we're quite ready to roll out.
How do folks join your cause? And I know that you described this a little bit, Rajiv, but who do you want to be part of this? Is there a particular sort of type of folks that you would want to be part of this community? How inclusive is it? Maybe can you describe that a little bit, and what should people get equipped with to come join AIUC-1?
Yeah. There's a couple of things we're looking for. One is the people who are really on the front lines of either making the decision on deploying a system or making a risk determination or not, and the people who are charged with kind of implementing a lot of these practices, right? So typically you see this at the kind of CISOs and the GRC leaders are the two kind of profiles we look for, but it varies by org, especially in financial services, for example. There's kind of technology and risk professionals as well, tasked with very similar questions and are extremely welcome. The core thing we're looking for is that the standard is only valuable if A, the content's good, so we always want input on that, but then B, if it's adopted in the real world, because otherwise we've just built an academic thing that isn't actually advancing security. And so the people who are tasked with approving their internal systems, building their internal systems, approving vendors who are coming in and need to make the risk determination on can we trust this agent or this vendor or not, and their input on what would it take for us to want to use AIUC1 and what's the packaging that needs to be there, what's the product form that we should be building to serve them and serve the community. That input is extremely valuable for us and would always welcome it.
Okay. And one question I want to ask you is that when you write all these harnesses as you test, I can understand some of the, for example, profanity, right? And you can testing things like that. But how do you test for things like security and data leak? Because that is something very specific to the company and its context, right? How are you going about? Are your end users equipped to make changes to these prompts? Are these prompts publicly published? How am I going to tweak this to my context?
I think the main thing we're looking to do is see how easy and how much effort does it take to manipulate the agent into a type of behavior that it's either not allowed to do according to its guardrails or to filtering of data. And so the type of techniques that we use to elicit, offensive speech or out of scope advice can also be reused to elicit other types of behavior, which relates to, sharing data, going beyond your guardrail, like going beyond the intended guardrails. Then what this means and how important it is will vary depending on the type of context and the type of customer, right? If you have an agent that's hosting data across multiple customers, making sure data is not shared across tenants is typically extremely important. If you have an internal agent, that might be less important, but you want to be sure that it cannot be manipulated by employees to access, specific sensitive data. So the context here is really the key. The expertise that we have is both mapping the risks and finding techniques to get agents to behave in a way that they're not supposed to, and then kind of grading this the result of this behavior.
Got it. Okay. I think the one thing that I like in what you guys are doing is that I think in cybersecurity insurance, I've never heard this anecdotally before. I've not been an insurance practitioner or anything, so don't take me to task. But for example, in order to insure cybersecurity insurance, one of the questions that they ask, right, especially for ransomware, is how many records do you have in a database or how many files? That's sort of very rudimentary sort of questions to assess, right, how much I should price your premium, right? But what you guys are doing is something very, very interesting, where you're actually providing more data and statistics behind how to model. I mean, how do you risk model these things? My question then becomes, is the intent eventually, is the expectation that insurance premiums will go down or they will come to market to a happy balance through AIUC1? What is your expectation at a macro context of what AIUC-1 can do?
Well, the highest level, I think, Raj, at the moment is if you go back to what you said earlier, a lot of insurers aren't actually offering AI insurance. And so how do we first give them confidence that they should offer any kind of insurance here, and the risk is well managed enough, well understood enough that they can price it and they can cover it? So that's step one for us. I think step two will be insurers, if you go into history, into other technologies, have played a really important role in creating the incentives for researching and deploying security and secure techniques. I'll just give you one anecdote. In the 1950s, when people were dying after World War II in car crashes on highways, Progressive, the auto insurer, said, we will give you a 20% discount on your car if you buy a car with an airbag in it. Way before this was federal law or this was commonplace as we think of it today. This is the role of insurance, because they're the ones seeing the data. They're the ones seeing the interventions that matter the most and the ones that don't. And then they can incentivize you to go out and adopt it. And so we'd love to build a similar flywheel here for AI, where every time it fails, there is a group of people who are incentivized to go and analyze that data, research it, gather it, and say, here's the thing that would prevent the failures. And now let's go and get it adopted. And that can happen through insurance. It can happen through regulation. It can happen through standards. There's lots of options here, but that's the core mechanism and the incentives we're trying to create.
Got it. And I think in some ways, a lot of this has to be front-loaded, right? A lot of this is architectural design discussions as well, which I think if you have to make sure that your RBACs are proper, your ABACs are proper, all those foundational things that we take for granted have to apply to AI as well. And I think what is super cool about what you guys are doing is that as you catch them, right, we get to build better systems and more secure systems. So absolutely, I agree with you. Anything else that you both want to share before we close out? I just want to yield a minute or so to you. Anything that you want to call out for is cool.
Maybe just the overall reflection is there is just so much to do. And it feels like, unfortunately, the timelines are just getting shorter for how quickly we need to develop the security techniques, get them adopted, get them deployed in the real world, because the next Mythos class model is coming. And before we know it, there's going to be open source models of that capability. And so the invitation for all your listeners is please join us on this journey. Would be honored to have you, and it's a privilege to play a small part in helping advance AI security.
Rajiv, David, great having you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us, Rajiv.
Thank you for listening to Security and GRC Decoded. We are your go-to resource for staying ahead in governance, risk, and compliance. If today's episode resonated with you, we would love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. To dive deeper into these topics, visit us at compliancecow.com and follow us on LinkedIn for more insights and community conversations. Join us next time as we continue decoding the future of GRC. Thank you.